Hello and welcome to Sherpa Bear Coaching. I've just finished interviewing Jacoby. He is the creator of MenFest, a festival for men that helps men embrace all that they are and all that they want to be. He has a very, very interesting story, and I want to thank Jay for sharing that personal journey that he has been on to be now in a place where he can give so much back to the male community. The next iteration of MenFest is from the 10th to the 13th of August in 2023. I intend to be there because I see the work that they do to have such great value. This conversation is longer than most of the interviews that I've undertaken so far because there was so much to discuss, and we both align around the need to help men and the impact that will have on society at large. So thank you, Jay. Thank you for sharing your story. I'm definitely going to have Jay back on the channel at a later date, maybe nearer to the time, or maybe even during MenFest, to talk to him and find out how that journey is going. Thank you for watching. If you haven't already subscribed to Sherpa Bear Coaching, please do so, because that will help me reach out and make more purposeful connections. Thanks very much and take care.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like loosen
Right.
up, you know.
No, I think I'm there. I mean, I've got a fairly complex makeup, I think. I live 4,786 miles away from where I grew up and the water that I was born in and drank and grew in, the land that I grew in. And all of it is kind of in there. I think it's kind of a kintsugi kind of thing, that Japanese artwork where the pot's broken and it's mended together with gold. I usually tend to take those little fractals and those little shards of pain and pottery that is my experience or experiences and weave them together and mend them together, mold them together so that I can I use myself a lot so that I can show guys that, yeah, it's a hard time. We're having a hard time. And there still is beauty in there. There's still a reason. There's still a point to living and to going forward and to thriving, entering what is thriving life.
So that statement there, just the fact that it's been said is an indication of what's going on. You said, we're having a hard time, but there is beauty in there. And, life is worth living. That's in a way an alarm call. If people hear this for the first time, I wonder what they think.
Yeah.
What does that mean?
Well, I think that there are far more people, men and women, that are feeling bereft of ideas, bereft of support, bereft of the point that we realize. I mean, the suicide rate of men between 40 and 55 or 60, 40 and 60 is absolutely alarming. And it's not like we're getting light at the end of the tunnel at the moment. You know, there's a lot in the news and around in the ether that is saying, you know, that there are a lot of alarm calls. There are a whole lot of alarm calls. You know, I do a lot of nature connection work, and that's kind of the kind of second string in my bow, I guess, at the moment, at present. The first one being men's work and creating circles for men to be in and to speak to each other and to be listened to. And the second is to give them some sort of a doorway out, to walk through, some sort of a handrail to know that they're not alone, other than just having the support of the brothers in the circle. The brothers, I say brothers, the men become brothers quite quickly. I think we're aching for that in this day and age. And connecting men, women, and children. We do a lot of nature connection camps for kids, and connecting kids to nature is I think paramount. You know, being grounded, being landed in this land, and you know, we have to kind of rewild ourselves. We have to rewild ourselves as humans. You know, to be able to handle all this. It seems like every time I turn around, there's another funnel to go down. There's another queue to get in. There's another kind of, you know, contraction. You know, even when we look at the internet, we turn on the computer and we go to Google and we go, I want to know about the mass of the moon. And I look at it and I have to go through a funnel first. I have to talk to someone about cookies. I have to go through this stupid little thing that we have to go through and click, or we just open ourselves up for bombardment, you know? So there's a funneling, and the work I want to do is to reverse that a bit, or to balance that with expansion.
Okay, so there's a certain level of constriction going on with the funneling. You're talking about expansion.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think we should put some context together for this.
Okay.
I love the way we've just started the interview. This is the way I start some of my coaching sessions. We just begin. You know, there's no, right. Sometimes not even a question. So we just start talking.
Right.
Okay, so first of all, Jacoby, thank you very much.
Jacoby,
I beg your pardon.
Jacoby, that's all right.
Jacoby, thank you. Thank you very much for joining me on actually what is now called Sherpa Bear Coaching. This channel's name has changed. It was called the Coaching Channel. So you're the very first person to be officially interviewed on Sherpa Bear Coaching.
Great.
And yeah, and we've met through a lovely introduction from a friend of ours, Angela Thumpson.
Yeah.
We had a conversation last week, just finding out how our paths can cross. And I really love that conversation. So I wanted, if it's okay with you, Jay, for you to introduce yourself and what your main focus is right now, and then we can dive back into that conversation where we were talking about funneling.
Yeah, great. My name's Jacoby. I'm currently a 50-year-old American who's lived in Britain for almost half my life now. A few years off, it'll be there. And I have quite a varied CV. I've done everything from restaurant and bar work to construction, property development. I was a cinematographer in America. That's what brought me over to the UK. I was a film cameraman and did loads of stuff within that industry, loads of commercials, loads of sports. I worked for NFL Film, shooting American football, um, uh, some feature work, fashion shows, music videos, all of that kind of stuff. A lot of media background. Had a web company in the .com boom and bubble and burst and all of that stuff. And that's when I kind of landed here in the UK, and the property market was going wild. So I really got into that with my wife, and that became a real passion, partly because I wanted to know Britain more. I wanted to know the history and the feel of it. So when my first son was born, my wife said, I don't want to live in a building site the whole time. Go get a job. So I became an estate agent. And I didn't know estate agents were 2 degrees off of being total scumbags until I was one and was treated like an estate agent.
No comment.
And then I became very good at my job because I thought it was a privilege to be asked into someone's greatest asset, shown the whole story of their lives and what they wanted to put together. And amazingly, it had a lot of similarities and parallels to the film industry, because there was a story that they wanted to tell about their property, and they had an objective, and it was my job to produce a package so that people from the outside would come in and buy it and to see themselves in that property. And because I live in a beautiful part of South Devon and the Southwest and the West Country, the properties kind of sold themselves. But, I rode the ups and downs of markets, and it was about connection, really. And when I got out of that business, I kind of came out of the corporate world, looking for myself, entering midlife. And it was kind of just before midlife. And I knew there was more connection that I wanted. And my wife was doing a lot of masculine, feminine balancing work at the time. And she was working with a woman called Pat McCabe, bringing together a thing called the Human Reunion, which was a gathering, a 4-day ceremony, really, here in Devon, which included loads of Indigenous elders and 100 and some odd women. And there were a few men that came together to hold the container, to kind of be the sentinels and to let the women do their work. And I had just started in putting men's circles together with my friends, going, hey, can we get together on my land and let's talk around the fire and just see what happens. And then when I got into some more organized circles, there was a lot of what I didn't want to do and a whole lot of what I did want to do. And so I was hooked immediately and got myself into doing men's work, creating circles for myself and creating circles for other men in other communities, and kind of putting together a framework for them. And then I started holding retreats because I wanted more. So I created an entity called Men's Nation, where I facilitated the goings on. I was the kind of voice that was heard, and got men together and did that. And it was great. And I also wanted to hear more of their voices than my own. So I watched my wife go to a big women's gathering, rather. And I said, yeah, that's what I want. I want a kind of a festival for men. So I put together MenFest. And so MenFest is much more about me creating the spaces, an embodiment tent, an expression stage, a black tent to deal with shadow work and grief and anger, a spa so we can take care of ourselves and be pampered, because tough guys needn't rough it all the time, good food, great camping. We camp in a mandala, which is very different. We hold the thing with a kind of a very circular, cyclical methodology, the 8 shields model. And it's really grown into something that allows me to hear the answers to all those questions I've got about what being a man is, and how can we do this healthily? How can we tend to our wounds, our traumas, our programs, our kind of dysfunctional programs that I don't care who it is, how together they are, there's some little chink in their, of dysfunction in their upbringing. And if we can get over those humps, then we can mentor each other and co-mentor each other to create more healthy masculinity.
Wow. There's quite a lot there.
There is. There is.
Okay, right. So wow, okay. Where do I go from here? There's a few things in there. I've written down the voice who listens and creates spaces. And then the next thing you said was about shadow work. Excuse me. The shadow work interests me because I don't know what it is necessarily. I suspect I might know something, but it seems to align with what I call the smoky mess.
Yeah.
I think I mentioned this when we first spoke. Could you speak a bit more about the shadow work and what might lead a man to find benefit in that?
Yeah. So if we look at ourselves starkly, if we really examine who we are so that we can figure out what we can bring, all the beauty, all the power, all the knowledge, all the love that we want to bring to ourselves, to our families, to our communities, we look at that and we big ourselves up. We point out what our gifts are, and then we can bring those to the table. But if we don't balance that with having a peek behind the curtain to see what is there that's lurking that might get in the way of us doing that, we're doing ourselves and everyone else a huge disservice, I think. I think that we're possibly unknowingly being disingenuous in arriving in ourselves, our power. If I think about ourselves, think about men, especially in archetypical terms, I can see that there are different facets of us as men. There's the kind of Jungian way to put it out there with the lover, the warrior, the magician, and the king. And there have been a lot of books written in recent years about those, and breaking those down, breaking our kind of selves and our psyches down into those so that we can go, oh, well, okay, the lover bit of ourselves is that bit that's kind of very fluid and open and can be wild and touch all of the boundaries, touch all of the edges of ourselves, where the warrior in ourselves is very boundaried, very focused, very driven. They know where their no is. They know where their yes is. They'll stand up for something if they need it. That bit of us, that we all have that. The magician is the one that asks the questions and gets the hard answers. And the king, I'm 50 now. I've got a white beard. people are calling me an elder. I don't feel like an elder. They're
You don't walk
setting
around
the
with the
staff.
staff.
I know, and a crown on.
Yeah, yeah.
And you know, that's the elusive thing. And this is coming from a guy who's been in an organization full of men that do a lot of work on themselves. From being in a small circle and being open, that I think is doing work and looking at that shadow, kind of pulling the curtain back and looking back there. To guys that have done actual shadow work, which really flings the curtains wide open and says, you're in a safe enough space. We are going to look at your deepest, darkest secrets. And the reason we're going to do that is because if you can come face to face with them, possibly, quite possibly, you can enter this facet of yourself that we all call king. You know, we use the 8 shields modeled to kind of lay out the work that we do. And the reason we do that is because I think that there's more than just the 4 archetypes. There's more than you know, I hear guys go, oh, well, I am what I am. Well, how complex is that? We're all kind of these walking spectrums, and we kind of flip back from one end to the other. And we all want to bring our best selves. But if we know what the shadow is of our best self, then we can actually go, oh, hang on a second, let's guide ourselves this way a little bit, and know that we don't want to get lost or step off into something that we're going to project onto someone else and go, oh, well, actually, this is your stuff, when we need to own it, you know?
Gosh, wow.
I answered that correctly, but
no, you have. I'm drawing some parallels in my head as I'm listening to you with something I have mentioned before on another interview, but it involves myself and a previous client talking about hypervigilance. Yeah, anxiety and nervousness. And this particular individual had some trauma in their lives. And through working with them, they said, well, to themselves, well, no wonder I am hypervigilant now, considering what I've been through. They made that connection.
Yeah.
And I said, okay, so what's the superpower behind hypervigilance? Where is it great? And struggled to get an answer. And we discussed it more and more. And it came down to, we said the ultimate place would be in war. In that particular conversation, we're not saying it's the right answer, but we gave we came up with an example where hypervigilance is a great place. Hypervigilance is a skill in warfare, and also suppression of emotions as well could be very useful in a particular scene in a war where you just have to get from here to there, you know, without dying. Right? Yeah. So then we looked at, well, what happens if a war carries on for a few years or a decade, and then the people in that war, when they come back into society, bring back all those skills that they've used day in, day out as their go-to skill. Yeah. And then those people then have children, and they are role models to peers and to children. And is it any wonder that there is a level of hypervigilance that may be linked back to something like that, or any experience in life? And I was just thinking about that in shadow work. So it's a long way of asking a question, but is what is in the shadow, can it be categorized as a skill, like the way I was looking at hypervigilance?
Yeah, of course. I mean, hypervigilance is born out of trauma at some point in our lives. I'm just I don't know how much of this I want to bring in, because my youngest son is adopted, and he's got he comes with a lot of trauma. He came to us at 15 months with a lot of trauma. And he's the epitome of hypervigilance, walking hypervigilance. And he shows me every day that he's at war every day, being loved, held, nurtured, fed, listened to, cuddled, encouraged. His frequency of vibrating, of being in the world, is at the end of the spectrum that very few people want to go to in their lives. You know, at the other end of the spectrum, my grandfather, but both of my grandfathers were in the wars, in World War II. My dad was in Vietnam. And I did a project with my maternal grandfather where I knew he was going to die. He had cirrhosis of the liver. And I was moving back to the UK for good. I was coming to stay. And I went and I said, right, I got a load of stuff I want to ask you. And so I filmed it because that's my background, you know. So I filmed this interview with him, and I didn't ask him like where he went to high school and, you know, what team he was on and all that kind of stuff. I did, but I framed it in a way that I wanted the answers that I wasn't going to be able to get from him later. So I said, you're dying of cirrhosis. Why do you have cirrhosis? And he said, well, because I was a lifelong alcoholic. And I said, why were you a lifelong alcoholic? And he said, because I was trying to get away from stuff that I saw. And I said, what was it? And he said, well, I was the youngest interpreter in the US Armed Forces because I grew up on the Texas-Mexico border, and I could speak fluent Mexican Spanish. And who knew that Mexican Spanish and Japanese have the same cadence? But a full bird colonel heard me talking one day and put me in language school. And within 6 months, I was fluent in Japanese, reading and writing. And so for my genius, they sent me to Nagasaki 2 weeks after they dropped the bomb on it.
Wow.
My job was to tell these Japanese people, I'm sorry, there's nothing we can do for you. You will die, because their cells were falling apart because they had radioactive fallout, you know, exposure. And so we know that today to be PTSD, we know that his hypervigilance, his trauma response came out in alcoholism, abuse of his kids, divorce after divorce, you know, response to post-traumatic stress, you know. And back then it was just called shell shock, or it was just, you know, I mean, drinking and driving was a thing. And he tried to kill himself 4 times by running his car off the road or getting completely smashed and hitting a bridge or something, you know. And now I see my son, if we're not careful, heading down the same path, because in the womb, he was hypervigilant. He was like with us, if we have a normal birth and normal childhood, I say normal, where we're loved. Yeah, there may be hard times, but you know, we get to a certain place where there's a comfort blanket that kind of comes down. There's a kind of an eyelid that comes over, and we go, we've got our shielders on, our blinders on, and we kind of go, our blast shields, right? We're gonna, okay, we can handle this. Our vigilance doesn't need to be hyper. Well, in my son, it's like his eyelids open to here, you know. When he opens his eyes, he's like, you know. So much so that when he was a baby, he would run to danger because he wants to control it, because he wants to be vigilant. He wants everybody to be okay. But his way of doing that is so hyper that everybody's tensed up and stressed out all the time. You know, we've had several visits to the hospital because he's like danger kid, you know. He's not afraid of the fire. He's not afraid of boiling water. He's not afraid of standing on the outside of a railing of the city of Carcassonne where there's a 300-foot drop behind him. And when I saw this, because I took my eyes off him for literally 20 seconds, I told him to get over the railing, and he jumped on it and flipped over and went, ta-da! You know, so that's hypervigilance in body form, you know. And is it a skill? Sure. Which I'm trying to figure out how I can aid him. It is. And
oh wow,
you know, getting him through a school week at the moment is a challenge. And I'm doing my best to hone it, because either he's going to be, you know, he's going to cure cancer. He's going to, you know, figure out how we can come together as, you know, people and sustain ourselves, or he's going to be a rock star, or he's going to be, you know, an international drug smuggler or jewel thief. You know, it's like the degrees at which we have to work with, and which they have to work with. People that are hypervigilant is very, very small.
So, okay. Wow. So, you know when epileptic people who have epilepsy have a fit.
Yeah.
I remember the first time I ever saw it happen, I was at a church, and the guy is a big guy, had an epileptic fit, and he had a big bunch of keys on his waistband.
Okay.
So I'll never forget the noise of him just hitting the deck and having a fit. And I can't remember who it was, but there was someone taking charge, just giving this guy space, and it was just gently holding this guy's head and making sure, you know, arms and legs couldn't hit anything. And the fit ended, and he, you know, regained full consciousness, and he was okay because he'd experienced it many times before.
Yeah.
I am going somewhere useful with this, I think.
It's all right. I'm with you.
So when we see a behavior in somebody in life and we don't, it seems ill-fitting to a setting like hypervigilance, I think there's such value in giving someone space to, in a safe way, which it sounds like what you're doing with your son. We're not trying to knock edges off them and have them fit the, you know, put the square peg in a square hole.
Yeah.
Because I think, as you said there is value in the shape they are now, that one day, you know, there'll be a cure for cancer in that person, or, you know, time travel or whatever it is. And maybe when we just try and get that person to conform down, maybe those edges that get knocked off end up in the shadow area.
Yeah. Well, that my response to my son, well, it's kind of this way for me all the time, because I'm American, because I speak English, I speak American. They're supposed to be the same. They're really, really close. They cloak each other, and there's a lot of saboteur in there, you know? So I have this translator that goes on in my head all the time. I have a conversation with someone, you and I mean, our jargon and our conversation, I think we're pretty much on the same page, and we're not speaking too differently. And when English comes in from an English person, I go, blah, blah, does that mean the same thing? And yep, okay. And then it goes through, and I go, right, okay. And then I can respond to that. So I'm doing that already. And then I have to go and try to be as trauma informed as I can possibly be to speak to my son, who is coming from his background, his program, even though he's my son. I've had him in my life. We chose each other. He was 15 months old when he came to us, but he's still full of opinion and still full of power and gusto because he was hypervigilant. But I have to do my best not to knock those edges off, knock those corners off. And I have to put it through my own filter of my program, my upbringing, dealing with my mom, who was the son of someone who had to look at children on fire. My dad was in Vietnam, and although he was very privileged to have the job he had and be fairly separate from the hard action, he's still there. And he's the son of, men, son and grandsons of men who had fought in wars before. So we're all walking around with this trauma. We're all walking around with some edge on us that doesn't fit with somebody else's edge, And I think that if we can be open about that, if we can create spaces where each of us are safe enough, we don't feel like we're going to be judged or we're going to have the edges hacked off of us. It's like every day shouldn't be like the Marines, where we get broken all the way down to our basic cellular level and then built up in someone's image or someone's idea of what we should be as humans. Because if we do that, then everything's green, olive drab green.
Yeah.
But there's so much color.
Yeah, I mean,
there's
like variety is the spice of life, and that variety can come in many different shades and challenging shades as well.
Yeah. One of the things we say with MenFest is that we believe in radical inclusion and radical participation. Now, radical inclusion is a very radical thing. The word radical is in there for a reason, because to say all of you is welcome in a circle, in a space, is very radical. Firstly, because we have to be ready for it. And getting guys ready for it is sometimes a chore, especially when we're not knocking them down and building them up to be able to handle it all. But when we say all of you is welcome, we mean it. It means that all of the good bits of our archetypes, the good bits of the facets of ourselves that make up us as men, as humans, are welcome, and those shadow bits are welcome. So, like, if someone is the vision holder and overseeing the whole organization, that's a good thing. That's what we want. We want someone who can be able to be that kind of king position and be benevolent enough to kind of support from the bottom, not to display power over. But the shadow side of that position is that they want to micromanage everybody.
Yeah.
Or that they do absolutely everything themselves. And it's hard for everybody to kind of go, oh, well, I've got a responsibility here, And each of those facets, each of those archetypes has that shadow bit, has that bit that, I guess, drawing in hypervigilance comes online when we're not balanced. you know, with Men's Nation and MenFest, we have 5 core values: compassion, humility, courage, integrity, and balance. And balance is the last one, because if we can't get there, we might as well hang it up.
Right. Okay. So there's a form of coaching, in the way I've been taught coaching, called balance coaching.
Okay.
Which is about perspective work. And I really love that. I really love the idea of moving around, like, you know, like yourself, you know, when you worked in film as a cameraman, I'm assuming you moved around your object, you know, so at times there were different places and you were getting different angles and you saw different things. And I suppose that's how we find out our good side and our bad side and that kind of stuff.
Wake up.
Don't film this side. Yeah, there's a balancing act as well between the being and the doing.
Absolutely.
You know, like the thoughts are great and feelings are fantastic as well, but coupled together with actions. And I think dancing between those different worlds is, I'm picking up lots of things that I experience, maybe in slightly different ways and settings with my coaching. Compassion, humility, courage. What was before balance, after courage? Integrity. Thank you. Yeah. Integrity and balance. And I've written down the non-attacks of shadows. Do you know what a non-attack is?
Mm-mm.
You know, when you see those pictures of like an ice cap, like it in Antarctica, and you see little peaks pointing out.
Okay, yeah.
They're the peaks of massive mountains, but they're covered. The rest of it's, you know, so there's the ice cap. That's the non-attack there. And what lies below is like, I'm looking at that like the shadow of somebody.
Okay, yeah.
So we see evidence of it. We see something of interest that and these are the things, you don't want to knock those non-attacks off, because Antarctica will be a very, very boring place. Much more so than maybe it is right now. If you knock all the non-attacks off and we just have a white glacier, well then everything's beige.
Right.
So I see that you're interested in the non-attack that someone has.
Yeah.
And what's below. And you're creating this space of radical inclusion. So tell me, could you give us an insight into someone arriving at MenFest,
mm-hmm.
the process in MenFest, and then the nature in which someone leaves? I think that would be very interesting if you could. I know the number of people you had go through MenFest, so but if you can maybe summarize that for us in some way, that would be very interesting.
Yeah. Well, I learned this phrase from a friend of mine. I just went on a retreat with him in Wales, and he had this lovely little phrase that he used called the arc of integration. And it is that, you know, when someone arrives, actually, it starts way before that. I'm kind of famous for saying 2 things in our opening ceremony at MenFest. First of all, the absolute first words out of my mouth is that we need to thank the feminine in our lives. I don't care what else is said. That has to be said, because honestly, without women, a woman at least, we would not be here. Full stop. So we have to thank them and be grateful that they created the space for us to be here. And second of all, you've done the hard work already. Everything that you're going to do this weekend is secondary to the work that you've done to get here, because it is a journey to make a decision to go to an all-male gathering, you know, to be around all male people. For some men, it's completely beige and boring because they want to be around women. For other men, it's the very last place they want to be on earth, because they suffered so much trauma. Maybe it was at boarding school, fighting for their lives, not to be ridiculed, shamed, beaten, raped, minimized, made invisible. So inviting men into that circle is inviting them in is one thing, but for men to make the choice to be there is it requires bravery. I think I know a whole lot of guys who are what in our kind of upbringing, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, media, they are called men's men. They're macho, and they have all the tools, and they've got the right look, and they've got the tattoos, and they've got, they're burly, they're out there, they're showing themselves to be masculine. And I go, well, how about come to an all men's circle? And they're like, nope, can't do that.
What's the can't do that? Okay, so that's one of their responses. Can't do that. Do you get? I don't need that. I'm fine.
Sure. Yeah, I'm like, oh, I've got my friends, I've got my mates and stuff, and I'd say, okay, well, on what level do you connect? Well, we are all Arsenal fans, or we're all Manchester United fans, or we're all Exeter Chiefs fans, or whatever it is. Okay, well, that's sport or military, or okay, so there's some kind of a connection where you felt that fraternal order of men, where you felt like you can stand in circle with men.
Belonging to a group, like an identity. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah. I mean, we all want to be a part of the group. We all want to be a part of the village, whether the village is made up of men and women and children and elders and the edge dwellers, the people that are questioning their gender, or they've totally changed their gender or their sexual identity or their sexual preference. We don't live in circles anymore, in pockets, in hamlets, villages, small societies where we have to accept each other because we need each other to be able to survive. We
have to accept each other because we need each other to survive.
Yeah, we don't live in those pockets anymore. We don't live in those little microcosms of the macrocosm.
Are we being sold then something? I mean, I think I've got my own answer to this question, but you said we have to accept each other because we need each other to survive. But it sounds like we're being sold this narrative that, the individual, you've got this, you should be able to do all this stuff. And if you can't, there's something wrong. So, why you shouldn't need, I don't need to rely on anyone. I'm doing this, I'm smashing life out the park.
Yeah.
The reality is very different. So we get the law of diminishing return. No, that's not the right phrase. We're setting ourselves up for failure if we're looking at, at this thing for all the answers.
Yeah. Well, we are that kind of nuclear setup, that husband, wife, 2.5 kids, picket fence, football on the weekends, growth at a certain level, getting the new car, keeping up with the Joneses, doing all of that stuff. Yeah, fantastic. Up to a certain point. That certain point was 150 years ago. And the story we're being sold is that, oh, no, it's still going on. It's still okay. Go buy that new car, get that bigger truck, use these tires, get this, all of this stuff is being rammed down our throats because it can be, because there is a narrative out there that is going to feed the few off of that.
Okay, well, I mean,
Not balanced. It's not balanced. It's completely imbalanced.
no, it's a carrot on an ever increasing length of stick.
Yes.
It's just over there. So if I just square this away and do that, then I get there, and oh, the carrot's now over there. So I've got
Yeah.
to and get busy in that, get busy in the chase, and not necessarily looking at the edges that we knock off. We talked about the nut
Yeah.
attacks, the things
Yeah.
we're knocking off just to be in that chase. But do you want to be in that chase? I don't.
Well, that's what the circle is about, right? Because it's not, it takes away the linear view. It takes away that hierarchical ladder that everybody wants to get on. If we bring in the wheel of the year, if we kind of stop, if we stop ourselves long enough to let our asses hit the ground, long enough to breathe. I don't mean like get all taut Nessie and meditate. I mean, just stop for a second, sit on the ground or put your feet on the ground and feel the earth below you and actually pay attention to what day it is, where we are, what season it is, what's happening, and feel into that, you know what? This is going to come around again because it has for millennia, millions of years. Whether we're here or not, this is going to still happen. We don't have to have that supreme sweatshirt to actually live. We don't have to have those Nike shoes. You know, we don't have to have, you know, we don't have to subjugate those people just to have a win, you know?
Oh, I love that. We don't have to subjugate those people just to have a win, because that speaks of either them or me.
Yeah. Well, then that's what a ladder is, because it is them or you. Because when you get on the next rung, you're winning over those people. You're not winning with those people or beside those people. You're winning over those people. You know?
Not winning with those people. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, you know, we've had this huge discussion at MenFest. We've got a thing called the arrow. I called it the arrow. Maybe it's cheesy, maybe it's not, but it's called the arrow because we are the arrow, right? The masculine is that focus that is laser-like and it goes, you know, it's that kind of Sagittarian movement. Off we go, boom. Whereas the feminine within us is that holding space. There's a bit of a theme here. Getting MenFest together is actually a very feminine thing to do, to hold space, to create a space, to be in circles so that we can be balanced, equal, together, have our hand on each other's shoulder and go, bro, when the proverbial hits the fan, you've got more than one place to go. You can turn and look at me and I can listen to you. And then I get, you know, and it can stop and we can balance. Then we look at the circular and cyclical ways that this planet has been doing what it's doing and that the galaxy around us has been doing what it's doing. And it's going to do it whether we like it or not. Whether we subjugate somebody else or not, it's going to keep doing it. If we can get in rhythm with that, then maybe actually we can start to play as a band.
Okay. Yeah, I love that. Playing as a band. Right, okay. I'm a big fan of analogies. I think people who watch these videos know that. Yeah, playing as a band rather than just trying to make this other tune work. And all of us are trying to make this. I think we don't know how close we are to what we want in life. And that analogy of the band, you know, different people playing different tunes and not even thinking they're in a band. And if they just turn the other way and look at each other and start to, you know, communicate through music. I've got a client of mine who taught me the drums. I mean, I've got some drumsticks here, and I occasionally tap away. I am a complete beginner,
Right.
and I've never ever experienced this jamming, right?
Yeah.
He taught me just a simple, 1, 2, no.
Yeah.
And then he picked up his bass guitar or his guitar, and just started jamming with me.
Right.
And then I didn't realize that I was changing what I was doing in response to what he was doing.
Right. Right.
And he said, "Oh, you're doing this now." I was like, "Am I? What am I doing?" And what we ended up with was very different to what we started. And I had no idea that was possible. No idea at all. And it's because we were playing to each other rather than trying to play our own tune.
Yeah.
So sorry, I've made that very personal, but I have to sometimes process a thought that way.
But it's personal to you, and it feels personal to you. But the truth of the matter is that it's inclusive of everybody else. Music is just a language. Music is a way to speak to each other, and what is speaking? It's connecting. Is the oral mycelium of a language of connection. That's what music is, and that's what the sooner we figure that out, the sooner we get back to playing together, the quicker we're going to stop the atrocities, really. They're huge. I'm not saying, look, oh, come on, let's all, sit in circle and hold hands and it's going to be fine. It's not. We have huge, traumatic, very difficult, life-altering, life-ending decisions to make. There are too many people on this planet to be sustainable, and the methods we're using are unsustainable. We are going to choke ourselves out if we keep doing what we're doing. But to create anything like an environment that is worth handing down to our kids and their kids and 7 generations to come, using a Native American analogy, we have to get our collective shit together. We have to read from the same sheet. We have to be playing similar music or talking to each other at least. And I've seen it. I've been in circle with guys, and everybody is on a different page, completely and totally. And one guy starts the rhythm. One guy. The buck has to stop with someone somewhere, right? Somebody has to lead. Someone is going to start, right? It's going to be the word. It's going to be the beat. It's going to be the sound. And all of a sudden we start and kind of go, okay, I can get into this. Oh, I need to learn this. I need to kind of get myself up on this kind of beat, this kind of rhythm that's going on. And then all of a sudden, 3 or 4 hours have gone by and we're in a drum circle and everybody's kind of hallucinating because we're so in time, in rhythm, feeling so free and in connection with each other, being stone cold sober, because we dared be vulnerable enough and trusting enough that we would follow each other and speak to each other in a language that we might not even understand.
Wow.
And it's as simple as using a drum.
See, now there is the backstory, which finishes with a scene of men in a circle, each banging their drum and speaking through, that language, the connecting. I think when other men see that end result, and they may think that's not for me, but then they're not privy to the evolutionary backstory that's produced that. And I think that's why this conversation is so valuable, because I know for sure, people I know, friends and clients, and past clients will watch this, and this conversation applies to them.
Mm.
Well, some in particular, but all of us, all of us men. So, not that this is your job, but how do you get someone past the stumbling block of having an image of what MenFest is and seeing that as an obstacle to accessing what MenFest offers?
Push them hard enough that they come.
Right. Okay. There you go.
I've got a, he's my flea. I've got a flea in my ear. You know, I've got that little thorn in my side that every single year this guy pops up on some thread or some, you know, marketing outlet of ours where we, you know, whether it's social media or email or some, you know, somewhere he always pops up and he's like, there's a huge question around MenFest about whether we allow cis females who live their lives as men to come to MenFest. What is a man? What is it to be a man? Do you have to be born with a penis? Do you have to go through a surgical procedure to get a penis? Does it, you know, is that it? Do we just go, oh, yes, you're a man because you have one of those, because you have a Y chromosome only? You know, does it come down to that? Or is it that we are open and inclusive of anyone who lives their life as a man, is the man in their family, and wants to explore and celebrate what actually being a man is? I don't mean let's have a vagina and put on men's clothes and go and hang out and like sit and look at the fishbowl of men. I mean, be a man. And, you know, men can tell, women can tell whether that man who's turned up in the circle, that woman who's turned up in the circle that happens to have a penis, is a woman or not. They know, you know, that person lives their life as a woman, has been a woman. She just happens to have one of those, you know? So this guy keeps coming every year. It's not MenFest. You should call it Mask Fest or Masculine Fest, because you're exploring masculinity, not what it is to be a man. I disagree. I disagree. I think if you resonate with the label man and that you live your life as a man, then you're welcome. Come in. Let's explore. Let's celebrate. Let's talk about it. Go ahead.
Is that observation by that person, is that a form of trying to chip off one of those nun attacks?
Yeah, of course.
Maybe.
Of course, because I've invited him. I'm not going to beg someone to come, you know,
right.
to MenFest. Yeah. You know, it's a scary thing. It is. You know, I've had guys there like looking over their shoulders thinking they're going to be attacked, you know, because they were the last time they were in that setting with men only.
Well, as in not that setting, but a setting
not
with
that
men
setting.
only.
No, yeah. when they were at boarding school, you know, yeah. I had a guy come, and yeah, he looked over his shoulder. I mean, he was about 6'3", 6'4", had a body like Adonis. He was in a suit, tie still on, waistcoat, shirt, you know, the cufflinks. Got out of a brand new 6 Series BMW in this field and was looking over his shoulders going, am I in the right place? And I was standing at the kind of check-in table and I said, I'm not going to hug this guy. I'm not going to ask him if he wants to hug. Hi, welcome to MenFest, you know? And he was looking over his shoulders and he was, you know, you can tell when guys are on edge, when he was ready to hit somebody. You know, I said, hi, are you here for MenFest? And he said, I think so. And I said, okay, why don't you come over? Let's talk and, figure out what's going on. I can show you the ropes. My name's Jay. This is Rajni, friend of mine. And we'll take you through the steps. How did you get here? My wife sent me. I've just come from the city in London, driven down here, and I'm here and I'm not sure why, and I was like, okay. And he kept looking over his shoulders, and I finally said, are you all right? And he said, I've sworn to myself after I left boarding school that I would never put myself in a situation where there were men only. Never. He said, my job isn't that way, even though it's very high powered. I won't work for a company that has men only. And I'm not into that. I was scarred enough. Within hours, I happened to turn around and look and see this man running across a field with his hat on backwards, a tank top, a vest top, covered in punk and heavy metal tattoos, Black Flag and Henry Rollins Band and PIL and Sex Pistols and, all of this and shorts. And he's sprinting at me and he lifts me up off the ground, shakes me around, and I'm not the smallest guy, but I'm not the biggest, but he's jumping around. And he's got this grin from ear to ear. And I said, what is going on? I was like, looking at Rajni going, this is supposed to be a drug and alcohol free event, like what happened? And he put me down and he said, I am so amazed that I can just be me. Nobody's here to attack me. No one's here to tell me that I can't do me, that I can't be me. And I went, oh my God, this is the same guy that had the suit on. I didn't know he was covered in punk tattoos and all this stuff, and he, somehow putting his tent up, looking around and seeing guys there, like not threatening him, asking him how he was and telling him where the spa was, where the kitchen was, where all this was, changed his life. And I said, babe, it's only Thursday. You've only been here for like 2 hours. We've got the whole weekend to go, And he made jewelry. He was in the circles. He did morning yoga. He was, this is a thing. This is actually a thing. Yeah, it is. Because we have to have those situations where we can find out who we are as men so that we can bring ourselves in a healthy form to the rest of our community. If we can't take care of ourselves, we're useless to everybody else. We don't have a space to find out who we actually are, not measured against some corporate marketing machine for Manchester United or DeWalt tools or Ford pickups. Then what are we bringing to our communities? Are we bringing ourselves, or are we bringing this marketed version of this person who knows all the kit?
I keep referring back in my head now as you're speaking to that chipping those none attacks off. And you said if we can't take care of ourselves, we are useless to everyone else. And I think the words I'm picking up there that which are important to me is that is a we, as in not a singular we, not the it's we, you and me, us as a men. If us men can't take care of the collective selves, then we are useless to everyone else. And I say that because I don't want to put pressure on somebody thinking, yeah, you individual, Dave, you're going to take care of yourself, otherwise you're useless. I'm not saying that.
Yeah. Thank you for saying that, because taking care of ourselves means being resourced, means having the support network, means having the minerals to be able to sustain ourselves to go forward, right? This isn't about being the macho man, the Marlboro man, riding your horse off into the sunset and knowing that you can take care of that bear and kill that buffalo and, build the log cabin by yourself. Or in today's day and age, live without a partner in a singular apartment, working on the computer, not causing too much of a fuss to the community around you, and just being a good little tax generator.
That will land with a lot of people. It lands with me as well.
Yeah.
Because I'm sat in my apartment. I'm sat
Yeah.
in front of a computer, and this is where I do a lot of my work, actually.
Yeah.
I pay my taxes.
Yeah.
But you know what I did yesterday? I don't know if I've got it to hand. I years ago went traveling across Canada, and every night, I made a fire and ate on the fire and slept outside, and it's like 12 years ago. And yesterday I went and built a little fire. I had a little stove. My mother bought me a present for my birthday, which is a stainless steel collapsible stove. It collapses down to the size of a mobile phone. And I went outside and I boiled a kettle and had some tea outside and just chatted to my neighbor who was out there as well.
Yeah.
And it was just that reattachment to something which is really important, which we don't do when we're in our little box, earning money. Maybe when we go to another little box and make sure the sheets balance up and all that kind of stuff, we forget that there are those edges that we have to explore to feel how we want to feel. And as men, I know from my work, lots of men do not feel how they want to feel. They don't know why they don't feel how they want to feel, and they don't know how to affect that. And I refer to that as the smoky mess. The client that you mentioned had trauma in their lives. I know men who feel rotten, who have not had that sort of trauma.
Sure.
But it's the cumulative knocking off of the edges of who they really want to be.
Yeah.
Leads them to, what is this?
Yeah.
Because I'm not happy.
Yeah.
But what I'm going to do is turn inward and try and solve it myself.
Yeah.
And use the same techniques, and I'm going to try harder and harder and harder. Yeah. And that is like pushing against the door which says pull.
Yeah. Welcome cancer. Welcome internal problems. Welcome all that stuff, because knock off all the non-attacks, you're still square inside and you can't go in the round hole.
That's yeah.
That's why we create the spaces we create. So guys can come and go, right, I've got a chance one time a year. I mean, that's why I'm kind of talking to you about how to diversify and stuff, and to bring more offerings. But MenFest is one time a year when we open the door and go, right, here's all stuff guy, here's all stuff men.
Yeah.
Check it all out. Let's have a conversation. And if you need to go wild, you can't go strip all your clothes off and scream and run around like a wolf out there in the street.
Oh yeah, okay.
It's time for the psychiatric ward, But if that's what you got to do, well, then we got you, bro. We got you. It's I'm not saying, yeah, of course there are parameters, there's safety. We all create safety and respect, and there are rules, there are guidelines. And if we do that within those parameters, I think those parameters are fairly broad. It's a drug and alcohol-free event. It's comes with respect for yourself and respect for your brothers. We have a pastoral care team. We're not all therapists. We're not going to fix you. We're just going to give you a chance to kind of check into it, to peek behind the curtain and go, some guys, their peek behind the curtain is is caring for other people. What they don't do all the time out there in the world is to nurture, is to give. I had a guy this year who, going through the 8 Shields model, the Southwest in the 8 Shields is about maintenance, sustenance. It's that kind of siesta in the late afternoon. It's the attendant responsibilities that go with that direction are looking after the toilets, making sure we have food. Do we have structures? It is what we need to maintain ourselves and sustain ourselves there, right? The guy who came forward, he was recommended by someone else, but the guy who came forward is 6'6", boxer, grew up inner city Bristol, multiracial guy who, if I had to get in the ring with him, I'd be afraid, really afraid, because he's a beast of a man. And the word that I said when I was going through the attendant rights and responsibilities of that direction I was asking him to step into for the whole year was mothering. That the Southwest is like the camp mother, it has that mothering energy. Not saying you're the mom with the penny on. I'm saying it's that mothering energy. It's that giving, that sustaining, that nourishing, nurturing role. And he went, yeah, I'm in. Say no more, I'm in. Was it something I said? Yeah, mothering. Really? He said, yeah, I'm a stay-at-home dad. My wife has a very powerful job, and I look after our 2 daughters. Hang on, darling, I'll be right there. I was like, what? I had no clue, no idea. And it was mothering that got him. That's his peek behind the curtain, because that's not what he does. That's his balance. I have no clue. First time I met him, he was annihilating these pads that a guy was holding up for him, in the embodiment area. I was like, no, I'm going this way. I'll take a few photos and then I'm going that way,
Wow. Part of the message then that I'm taking from this is that MenFest can be it's like a much needed, like a roundabout on a road. Rather than just carry on down the road, you're circling the roundabout at MenFest, and you can stop and get off and walk into the roundabout and have a good look and see who you are being, what you are doing. You can look at your edges, and then you don't have to get back on that particular road. You can adjust your course. It's a very safe container to explore these things. And what I'm getting from what you're telling me is that it can be quite maybe challenging to just abstractly witness if you could somehow do that, but it all makes sense. It all makes sense.
Yeah. It starts with an agreement. It starts with an agreement to respect each other. It starts with an agreement to take care of each other. There are a whole lot of gatherings that you can go to, retreats, weekends, courses, organizations, initiatory, rites of passage that you can go to, and they are fully, back to the archetypes, they're fully in their lover. You can go do tantric yoga weekends and really get to not ejaculating. You can, you can be fully in your lover, even all male things, mixed, tantric weekends. It's full lover. We're going there. There are umpteen organizations out there that are bringing men into their warrior, giving them a framework to arrive in their boundaried self, so that they go, hang on, you have come up against my boundary. You have affronted me enough that I'm ready to pick up my staff and plant it in the ground and say, no, I won't have that. You know, a lot of times, you know, the tools they use to do that are, you know, really strong. Shame is a big one. You know, shame is one of those emotions that is so strong it will grow a backbone in someone who doesn't feel like they've got one, really, really quickly. It will make them plant their staff. You know, you can go to shamanic weekends and enter your magician. You know, we're going to get way out there. We're going to do loads of medicine. We're going to talk to the spirits, talk to the animus, talk to the universe out there. Get really in your magician. There are these things. I haven't seen a lot of them that really go in fully into the king, because I think honestly, the men who like really discuss what a king is and really can speak from experience probably are older, or they're really trauma informed from their own experiences. Because being a king is not about power over, it's supporting from the bottom, having washed all the toilets, having cooked all the food, having provided all the stuff, having done all the perspiration, having shown up and performed and harvested that performance. And you know, they bought the t-shirt, they sold the t-shirt, they gave the t-shirt away, they hacked someone's arm off for the t-shirt, they wove it themselves, the t-shirt, you know, they begged for the t-shirt, they've done it. That's what a king is. It's not about this sovereign and having power over. It's about going, you know what, I've been there. I'm wearing this thing because I've been there and I understand and I can help you get through. And the king, the last thing he has to do is turn and die. That's it. Right? And if we're preparing each other for a good death, and well, then if a good death is coming, then we've had a good life, hopefully balanced life. And we've been through a lot of the wheel of the year, a lot of the facets, a lot of the shields, if you will, you know, a lot of the archetypes, and we understand those. And ultimately we've come back to the center in a balanced way. That's what MenFest is about, is that all of you is welcome, because whatever cardinal or ordinal direction you're in, bring it. And we're holding each other accountable. We're holding each other in safety. You know, when we agree to that, we mean it. Brotherhood is, you know, something that isn't just said. Brotherhood is something that is cultivated and experienced. It just so happens that when you go to MenFest, you go in on X level, and no matter how light and kind of shallow we want to make it, that Mariana Trench comes up real quick, you know.
Oh, that's good. I like that. Yeah. Oh, okay, right. Okay. So I'm going to come on to some sort of nuts and bolts of MenFest in a minute. I think it's important for our audience to understand that and how to access it.
Yeah.
So this is the point of the interview where I'm going to offer my perspective on your purpose in life, the life purpose statement. Ooh, there's lots of things I can say. So again, for you, JM, for the audience, this is just a first offering. You try it on like a jacket in a shop, see how it fits, experiment with it, play with it. So I had written down, you're the cultivator of men who allows the orchestra of non-attacks to grow and play together. So you're the cultivator of men who allows the orchestra of non-attacks to grow and play together. And I've got about 15 variations of that I could say.
I feel very honored, actually, for a description of what I do to be anywhere near that.
Well, I think it's well earned. And I'm only reflecting on our conversation. I'm not plucking stuff out of thin air. So for me, this is true. And this is the view I have of you. And I want you to see it. The cultivator of men who allows the orchestra of non-attacks to grow and play together.
Yeah. Wow.
And there's a lovely story behind that. You know, that will mean nothing to somebody who's not been privy to our conversation. But boy, does it set up for a great story.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that there's a conversation to have. I think there's loads of conversations to have. It's the value of what you're doing. Now, you said earlier, we have to accept. No, hang on. Where are we? I've written down so much stuff. Yes. So I use an analogy of the wheel, and anyone that I coach is the hub of a wheel. And this came out actually from me targeting to trying to work with men more. So I'll describe men as the hub of the wheel. And everything in their life they can put their energy into is a spoke. So partner, job, finances, friends, children, you name it, business, they're all spokes. And spokes are shiny and they're easy to see because you can see them because they're not you.
Yeah.
So you can go fiddle with the spokes and make sure they're all okay and they look fantastic and they're doing really well. And I would class that as externally succeeding.
Right.
But when do you look at the hub? And if anyone has ridden a bike, most people don't service their hub. What happens is the wheel slows down. If you notice, you might just apply more pressure when you cycle. But if you actually have a bike, when was the last time you took the hub apart? And the reason we don't is because it's a bit hard. You know, it's harder than cleaning a spoke. And we go to a bike shop maybe and say, not sure why this isn't working. And I think that what you're doing is really helping people understand what the hub needs, letting the hub be the shape that it wants to be. It doesn't have to be round. It can be all manner of spiky business and what have you. And when you take care of that hub, then by default, you're taking care of the rest of that wheel, which will be all those things that I've mentioned. And think about every wheel overlapping with another wheel. You know, when you influence someone powerfully in this way, like the chap you meant, a few examples you've given, I can just imagine the benefit to their ecosystem when they go back into life following MenFest, and just the unknown consequences and the impact they're having because they've been allowed to care for their hub at MenFest. They've been allowed to be the non-attack and look at the shadows and embrace everything. So I think now will be, well, what do you have to say about all of that?
I'm in 100%. Yeah. That gels with me perfectly. That's my raison d'etre, really, is to, to create that balance, to create that health, really. That health.
So let's talk then, before we finish up, let's talk about MenFest 2023. What can we tell people? What can you tell people? What do they need to know to make it accessible to them?
Well, I've mentioned it quite a lot, the Eight Shields model, and it was born out of a book called The Coyote's Guide to Connecting with Nature by John Young and two other people. I really wish I knew their name. Actually, right here. It's this book here.
Okay.
Ellen Haas and Evan McGowan, right? And Coyote's Guide to Connecting with Nature. And it goes through what he calls the Eight Shields model, what they call the Eight Shields model, and the art of mentoring. And what that was born out of was, very briefly, his teachings by Native Americans, and then introductions and teachings by the San Bushmen in Namibia, the Sami in the Arctic Circle, loads of other indigenous tribes all over the world, feeling and kind of saying the same thing. You know, the sun rises in the east, it goes down in the west. If you're in the northern hemisphere, north is usually categorized as cold, south is categorized as warm. So if you look at us in archetypical terms and kind of lay that over, then you've got east is welcome, southeast is childhood and learning where the hazards are. South is our warrior. That's where the boundary is, timekeeping. Southwest is that kind of gap year, that bit, that kind of siesta, late afternoon. And these, they overlap in times of a day, times of a year, a lifetime. They all kind of have similarities. So Southwest is about sustenance, maintenance. West is about performing, arriving as parents, really showing up, doing what we need to do, presenting our thesis. Northwest is about recording what we've just, the story we've told, honoring our ancestors. North is about being that king, being that vision holder, the one with the long view who's done all the stuff. And then the Northeast is where we start and where we finish. And that's that liminal space. That's where conception happens. That's where death and rebirth happens, where we get that kind of spark from the universe. And so we've used that to hold MenFest together. So if I really adhere to that model, then 2018-19, when we started, our gathering is always the end of, the second week in August. So that first year was in the Northeast, that kind of conception space, right? Where we kind of conceived it, and then we had our first gathering. The second year, 2020, we still put it on during COVID. We had to kind of call it a wild camp, and we had to go. We just so happened to be right in the middle of the window when the government said we could meet with more than 500 people, or up to 500 people. So we met. We did the same exact thing. There were a few more eyes on us and people asking questions. But that was our our East year, our kind of welcome, our birthing, really. Okay, yeah, even though we'd done it once before, it was really our kind of landing, and yeah, this is what we mean. The third year we did it, 2021, was about our Southeast. That's our learning through play, learning to put one foot in front of the other, making sure we mean it, standing on our own, all that stuff. Our fourth year, which was this year, 2022, was our warrior year. And there was a lot of warrior there. Loads of face paint, loads of wrestling and embodiment, being teens. That felt like very teen energy. And 2023 is about us landing in and arriving as hearth holders. Really amazing that right now in the world, what we really need to look at and pay attention to is sustenance and maintenance. And I think MenFest is going hand in hand with that. So yeah, 2023 is really going to, I think that a lot of the questions are going to be about how do we actually create thriving life? How do we sustain thriving life? How do we create new economies so that we can all eat? How do we arrive at the table and have equity around it when not one person's hogging the whole roast? You know, I think that I feel that already. You know, place bookings are available now. We've got seed fund places available for the next 3 weeks, I think. And the place bookings for MenFest aren't onerous. I mean, money is money and it's energy, and they're not hugely expensive. I think the most expensive is still under 200 pounds. And the way MenFest is put together is that we all pay for our place there. And then we bring our gifts. We don't pay, we don't pay performers to come and be headliners. The headliners, the guys that we've had there for the past 4 years, have been leading lights, vanguards, pioneers in men's work, in shadow work, in ecstatic dance, in yoga, in meditation, in conscious sexuality, in hand-in-hand parenting, in relationship work. You know, that all of the guys come, they bring their thing, and we put the schedule, the list of offerings and performances together there, or just in the weeks leading up to it. And this year it was so rich, the schedule, the diary we had, and I expect it to be more. We have space for 300 men. We want to keep it intimate enough that we can know as many people as we can, and to get it out there to as many men as we can. And so, yeah, we have 300 places. The land that we're on is storied. It's held Buddha Field and Tribe of Doris and Green Earth Awakening and Shambhala festivals. It's been there doing its thing for 40 years. The people that the guardians of the land, the owners of the land, are not going to be surprised by a whole bunch of guys turning up and banging drums. You know, they're and it's magical. I really feel like the land helps us do what we do because it holds space for us. And I feel like, not to sound too Messy about it, but I feel like the trees cheer when we come onto the land, you know?
Oh, that's a nice image in my head now.
Yeah. I really feel, I mean, there are some grandfathers and grandmothers there, that the trees there are huge and deciduous and lovely and very much a part of the gathering.
Okay, so number one, I want to come. That would be amazing.
Great.
Yeah, it sounds like a golden opportunity.
Yeah.
Number two, so 300 places. I can just see these getting filled pretty quick. There's a rare opportunity for people to listen to this conversation and hear the rich backstory behind the evolution of MenFest. And you're the hub of that wheel. Yeah, and maybe MenFest is one very large spoke, but you know, you're the hub of the wheel. So I think there's real value in hearing about the hub. You know, from your journey from the USA and your career and how you came here and your family and the development of that. And this is people love a story. This is a great story. And it's still taking place. The story is being told every year in MenFest. I've drawn myself a compass,
Mm.
And I've been writing down, where each. So Northeast was 2018. I've drawn that all out, and I love that. I love the visuals. Oh, there we go.
There's that. That's there we go.
Ah, okay.
Now I did this like in 5 minutes for one of my Zooms for the 8 shields, for the collective.
Yeah.
So what I didn't say is that we have a man who. So I've been the North for the past few years, and then we've got men inhabit these wedges, these directions, and it's quite interesting to be, say, a guy who is usually a very South person. They're very boundary, time driven, they very succinct with everything, to go into the dreamer and be like just asking the universe for some guidance. It's can be quite scary, I think, for guys to go, right, I'm going to bring this energy and all of the rights and responsibilities. I'm going to do it, So there are 8 of us that hold the gathering together. Okay. And we've got second shields, guys who are kind of seconds, and we kind of the north of our little thing, and it goes on and on and on, it's like gears. It becomes gears,
Okay. Yeah. Well, that the gears and that machine, I think, is such a great thing that it exists for men. There is a need for it. There is a want for it. And I'm so happy that our paths have crossed.
Me too.
I would need to thank Angela Fumpson for putting us together.
Yeah.
I think we're going to have to get you back on.
Okay.
And talk maybe, a key moment, either if that is MenFest or just prior or just after. But I think the story, there are other parts to tell.
Yeah.
So if you're willing to do that, I'd love to do that.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Great. Wow. Okay. So Jay Jacoby, you are the cultivator of men who allows the orchestra of none attacks to play and grow together. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for creating the space, holding the space for me to inhabit. Yeah.
My pleasure.
Yeah. Great.